Savadhutam Parijanam Krishna Caitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Sarada Shri Vishakanta He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhana Govesha Gopika Kanta Radha Namaste Tapta Kancha Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishwananuste Devi Pranamami Ganitaye Panchakalpatarishya Kripasindhubhyo eva ca Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Radha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I'm very grateful to be here today. It wasn't my turn to speak here, but Brahmatirtha Prabhu said you must speak because it's Advaita Acharya's appearance day, and I have instructions from him to make it special. And so what I did is I brought a handwritten copy of the Chaitanya Caritamrita. This is about as old as this country. And our previous acharyas had a whole system of hand copying manuscripts, starting with the generation of Srinivas Acharya. So this is from that school of copying manuscripts. I've kind of lived the life of a spiritual Indiana Jones of sorts. And Shruti Prabhu and I were speaking one day at my place, and I showed him, and today morning he said, I hope you were getting it. So I'm glad I could be of some service. Should we just get started with the Chaitanya Caritamrita?
Yeah.
Today is the auspicious appearance day of Advaita Acharya. And what I'm going to do for the next few minutes is give a very brief historical background that will help us make sense of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu, and Advaita Acharya. And then I'm going to connect it with the history of Sri Krishna. And then if you have any doubts on what we discussed today, just stop me, raise your hand, ask away. How many of us have heard the verse Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Srij means to create, and srijamyaham means I recreate myself again and again and again. Whenever there is a decline of dharma and a rise of adharma. And if you look at the Vedas, you have a very blurry idea of what is dharma. Sometimes dharma is duty, sometimes dharma is justice, and some of the dharma shastras, and if you ever walk down the basement of Library West, you see a whole shelf of dharma shastras, volumes of it, right? And if you consult all of those dharma shastras, they say that nobody really knows what is dharma. In fact, whatever 5 or 7 people who are wise, who are well read in dharma, come together and decide to be dharma, becomes dharma. So there is, it's like 108 shades of gray. However, the Srimad Bhagavata is very clear about what dharma is. According to first canto, chapter 17, dharma is satya, which is truthfulness or integrity. Saucha, which is cleanliness or hygiene, Tapa, which is austerity, enterprise or endurance, and Daya, which is compassion, empathy, kindness. These are the four legs of the bull of dharma. And whenever these four values are compromised, it is Sri Krishna's promise that he appears along with his friends and companions to reset dharma. Does this make sense so far? And the Bhagavata says that there are millions and millions and millions of such avatars throughout the universe. That means, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur says this, don't think avatars appear only in India. Avatars appear everywhere. And so for at least us Indians, when we first hear that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is an avatar, we are so culturally conditioned in thinking that, say, okay, Sri Krishna can be an avatar, Lord Ram can be an avatar, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Not sure. Alright, so once you hear that, the next thing that comes up is, actually, Nityananda Prabhu too is an avatar. Like, alright, one was good. You have one more? There is one more. Sri Advaita is also an avatar. What is this? It looks like an avatar store. But the fact is, the Bhagavata says, there are as many avatars as there are waves in an ocean. And how to recognize one? First, you don't accept any ordinary person to be an avatar. If someone is an avatar, they will have 6 opulences to the fullest. Right? And if you look at Srila Prabhupada's definition of what is Bhagavan in the introduction to Krishna book, he'd say that there is a subtle difference between the word God and the term Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now that's a mouthful, but this is what it means. Someone who has the 6 qualities, and you probably know all of those, in its fullest is considered Bhagavan. When a person manifests all of those 6 qualities, they are accepted as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When they manifest some of those qualities, they are Amsa avatars or part avatars. Right? And in this way, even Srila Prabhupada is accepted as a Shakti Avesha avatar. That means an empowered incarnation of Nityananda Prabhu. Right? So the idea of avatars in Vaishnava theology is a little different from the generic notion of God. And I've served as a professor for many years. I've tried explaining this thing to American students. For those who've taken Krishna House lunch will definitely understand this example. In some cultures, salt and pepper is considered spice. Salt and pepper is spice. It's like, can you make this spicy? See, here's the salt and pepper. And imagine trying to explain that salt and pepper is spice to somebody who's grown up on garam masala. It doesn't work. So the concept of avatar is like garam masala. But the word God is like salt and pepper. Is it spice? Yes, it is. Does it explain the whole thing? No, it doesn't. Right? Avatar, Bhagavan, these words are very subtle and nuanced. And the Chaitanya Caritamrita, Adilila, says that this world has 2 causes. Have you heard of the word God as generator, observer, and destroyer? G-O-D. Well, Vaishnava theology gets a little more complex. It says even the generator has 2 causes. The nimitta cause and the upadana cause. Right? Say, think of this microphone. So this microphone is made of metal and plastic. The stuff that it is made of is called upadana. And the purpose with which it is made is nimitta. Right? And the Chaitanya Charitamrita says Advaita Acharya is the upadana karana. Mahavishnu in its upadana karana manifest to help Mahaprabhu in his mission. And that's what Advaita Acharya is. So it's a little more complex than Advaita Acharya's God. First, he is avatar, he is Purna avatar, and he is the Upadana Karana. How does this work? Well, the Bhagavata says God is never alone. Right? If you look at the pastimes of Sri Krishna, you will see that there were four Vishnudattvas, or four kind of, in very common parlance, great personalities hanging out all the time. Sri Krishna, his brother Sankarsana, Krishna's son Pradyumna, his grandson Anuruddha. And they are called the Chaturvyuha, the quadruple manifestations of Vishnu. It's Vishnu in four forms. Right? But fast forward 4,500 years or something like that, and something more interesting happens. You have what I call the Pentenity of God. Have you heard of the word Trinity? We have Pentenity. I told you, salt and garam masala. You can't compare apples to Pentenity means God Himself, the devotee of God, the energies of God, the avatars of God. All of this together is God. Okay? And it's a very complex idea. You don't just get it like that. And why do we have this version of God? Here's the story. Thousands of years back, or once upon a time, as Prabhupada puts it in his Krishna book, there was a very cruel king called Kamsa. You know that story? But the story doesn't end there. If you look at the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad, you would notice that corrupt kings can exist when there are corrupt emperors above them. And so Kamsa could be corrupt and get away with it because he had other corrupt kings propping him up. Jarasandha, Dhritarashtra. Huh? Yeah. And so in ancient India, you had a time when a network of corrupt kings wrestled control of power. And dharma declined, adharma went up. And it was time for an avatar. Right? And if you look at the life of Sri Krishna, you would notice one very simple thing. From his infancy, he is fighting one demon after another. And just as he fell in love in his young days, it was time to go. He was yanked out of his idyllic forest life in Vrindavan and cast into city life in Mathura. And once he killed Kamsa and liberated his parents and his grandparents, the news spread that there is this young boy who killed Kamsa, the powerful king, and immediately Kamsa's friends became Krishna's enemies. And after that, Krishna could never really go back to Vrindavan. One of our Gaudiya Vaishnava commentators, looking at the Bhagavad Gita, points out a small Sanskrit grammatical mistake Krishna makes in the Gita. Now my question is to you, can Krishna make mistakes?
No.
But Krishna uses the word Brahmin in feminine to talk about Brahman, which is masculine and neuter. Why would he talk about Brahman in feminine? And the commentator says that even in the middle of the battlefield of Kurukshetra, his heart is in Vrindavan and he's thinking about Sri Radha. Right? So he is, telling Arjuna, stand up and fight. But for what? For dharma, for the sake of dharma. This is not your battle. Right? Fight the good fight because we need to uphold dharma. Right? And we all know what happened at the end of the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And in this way, the life of Sri Krishna again and again demonstrated that Namo Brahmana Devaya Go Brahmana Hitaya Cha Jagad Hitaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha. That the 6 weakest links in the collectivity of life. And Srila Prabhupada talks about this in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Animals, children, sick people, old people, helpless intellectuals, and women in vulnerable positions are the weakest links in the collectivity of life, and Sri Krishna does everything to protect them. And the way you protect it is by upholding Satya, Socha, Tapa, and Daya. But the times in which Sri Krishna appeared were violent times. And it was a period of India when there were 16 powerful kingdoms in the north that were vying for positions of power. Fast forward to the time of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, something else is happening. There are 3 powerful kingdoms in north of India at the time Mahaprabhu appeared. There was the Delhi Sultanate, and if you're interested after this class, look it up online. There was the Shahi dynasty of Bengal and the Gajapatis of Orissa. Right? And it's practically like, imagine if Canada, USA, and Mexico were constantly at war with each other. And at this time, cities were plundered, libraries were burnt, schools in particular were destroyed. And at this time, Navadvip was considered, and I've heard Tamakrishna Goswami say it, like the Oxford and Cambridge of Asia. It was a center of learning. And if you look at Mahaprabhu's life, he was a professor of grammar and logic. But imagine being a professor in a country where the things that you study is considered haram, abominable. And every effort is being made to stop schools, and villages are plundered one after another just for the loot. And people are left to fend for themselves with nothing. You can't have an educational culture within such a historical context. And in the middle of this situation was one old professor of philosophy. In fact, he was a professor of non-dual philosophy. You know what non-dual is? Something that says there is no difference between you and me. That's non-dual. In Sanskrit, that word is called Advaita. And professor means Acharya. He was a professor of non-dual philosophy. Till one day he realized, what exactly am I doing here? What's the value of what I'm doing? If my knowledge, if my learning cannot do anything for the suffering of my fellow beings, what's the point of being a professor? So he quit his campus town and went to live among the tribals at a place called Shantipur. And I did not know this till I went last year. I went to Shantipur, to the house of Advaita Acharya, and their descendants who still maintain the land says about 700 acres surrounding Advaita Acharya's house are still tribal land. He quit his educational career. He quit a high-flying career to go and live among the tribals because they were the most neglected demographic in their land. And they were the worst victims of these incessant wars that were happening between the sultans, the shahs, and the Gajapatis. Do you see the context in which Advaita Acharya was born? And he was old and he felt helpless. And so out of his helplessness, people would often find him screaming and yelling at his Shalagram Shiva. His house was right on the banks of the Ganga River. And is there a way to pull up Google Maps on this computer?
Yeah.
Let's pull up Google Maps. I want to show them where it is. Google Maps and then search for Shantipur. And he was taking, he had nothing. He had given everything up. There you go.
Advaita Acharya's house.
Sure, exactly what you're looking for. I just googled Shantipur, West Bengal.
You can look at Advaita Part, it's in Babla. B-A-B-L-A.
Advaita?
Advaita P-A-T-H. B-A-B-L-A. There you go, that one. And if you do the satellite version, then you would see the course of the original river. So you just go to that little green box at the bottom. Yeah, there you go. Let's scroll, let's drag this up a little more. You see a kind of a green arc with rice paddies. That used to be the Ganga River.
Wow.
And Advaita Acharya's house was right there. It's on Google Maps, believe me. Right? So he had nothing. He had a lot of tulasi trees around his house. There was Ganga water. He had a Shalagram Shiva. So he would get whatever he had available to him, and he would be cussing and screaming at his Shalagram Shiva. What is happening here? Come now! Right? And very soon, it is said, the Lord heard his own prayers. And he manifested as Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Right? In the house of Jagannath Mishra and Sachi Devi. Now, if you look at the circumstances of Mahaprabhu's birth, it is very similar to that of Sri Krishna's birth. The Bhagavata, 10th canto, starts with that when the earth was overburdened by military arrangements that were armed to the teeth, ready to kill each other at the slightest provocation, right? The demigods, Mother Earth being overburdened, approached the demigods for relief. And if you look at the Bhagavata, you'd notice the very first canto talks about earth in the form of a cow and dharma in the form of a bull, and how Parikshit Maharaj goes and saves them. And if you look at the end of Srimad Bhagavata, you'll notice the book finishes with Bhumi Gita, the earth song. And the clue to why that happens is in the Mahabharata. In the Mahabharata, when Sri Krishna is traveling to the Kauravas to negotiate a truce, he meets a sage on the way. And the sage asks, Krishna, you're fine in Dwarka, why are you going to Hastinapur? And Krishna says, these cousins are about to kill each other, I must try to stop them. Right? And a few months later, Krishna is going back to Dwarka, and he meets the same sage, and the sage asks him, so what happened? Is there peace now? Because the sage is in his cave, he doesn't know what's going on. And Sri Krishna says, no. Actually, these cousins fought, now everybody's dead. And the sage asked Sri Krishna, but you are Bhagavan. You could have done something. And Sri Krishna said, no. Because I will never infringe on the free will of living entities. It is their choice. I can only give them good counsel. But what they do is their decision. And he said, but even then you're Bhagavan, you could have stopped it. Why did you let the war happen? And Sri Krishna says, for the sake of Mother Bhumi, for the sake of earth. So Sri Krishna let a war happen for the sake of protecting Mother Earth, because the people who were in control were not practicing dharma. But by Caitanya Leela, the whole thing flips around. There is no war. And Jiva Goswami points this out. Krishna Varnam Tvisa Krishnam Sango Pangastra Parshada Yagyai Sankirtana Prayeri Yanti Sumedasa. Those who are very intelligent get this point. But the battle at this point is not physical, it's psychological. We are living through a major pandemic. Don't think it's over yet. After Omicron, something new might come tomorrow. Right? And if you think about it, if you look at the statistics, it has been a bit of a mini world war. If you look at how the Second World War was, the same amount of border restrictions, casualties, with innocent people dying with no fault of their own, governments armed to their teeth, ready to attack at the slightest provocation. And so, we have experienced in our lifetime a situation that is not normal. Right? It has been a bit of like a biological warfare. But the major warfare in this age is in the minds of people. How many of us have heard of the word GAFAM? GAFAM, anybody? Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft. It'll soon become GAMAM because Facebook is becoming Meta. But if you look at what these 5 tech companies that practically rule the world today are doing, it is fighting for our attention. It is programming human beings where they decide what we're going to consume, what we're going to hear, how we're going to think, and what we're going to buy. And the stuff that they are selling to us is not for our own good. We know that. And so, battles with swords and arrows don't work anymore. The battle is right here. And the weapon to fight that battle is spiritual sound vibration. And each one of us is a warrior in that battle. And this is why Advaita Acharya was praying that at the end of the day, these kings might fight, but people are suffering right here. You cannot re-establish dharma with weapons anymore. The only weapon that you have right now is Shastra, holy names, association of Vaishnavas, and this is what the Panchatattva, or the Lord God in 5 features, came to teach us. In particular, there is one thing that the Chaitanya Caritamrita points to, which becomes the most effective antidote to the difficulties we face today. What is it? Anybody guess? There is the holy names, there is Shastra, there is Vaishnava association, staying in the Dham, so on and so forth. But there is one particular thing which is very psychological, that is the ultimate weapon in this battle. Yes?
Sankirtan?
Yes, but there's something more to that. Prasad? Yes, but there is something more to that. What are we doing when we are serving prasad?
Developing relationships.
Yes, but there is something more to that.
Serving.
The holy name?
Yes, but who's that serving?
Serving.
That's what the Chaitanya Charitamrita says. That there is in the middle of all of this, there is just one component that makes love of Krishna amazing. What is it? Krishna প্রেমের এই এক অপূর্ব প্রভাব গুরু সম লঘুকে করিয়া দাস্য করয় দাস্য ভাব. That means in the world everybody is very eager to be served. The only difference between Jivas and Sri Krishna is that Jivas want to enjoy and Sri Krishna wants to serve. That's the only difference. Sri Krishna, you might think Krishna is always enjoying, but Krishna is enjoying to be able to serve. And only when Jivas give up this mentality that I will be served and turn around and begin to serve or develop the attitude of serving, even when they are chanting the holy names or serving prasad, whatever they might be doing, stock trading. But if it is service, that changes the whole thing. Atmendriya pritivancha tar nama kama krishnendriya pritivancha tar prema nam. Means everything we do, we put ourselves as the hero of our story. And guilty as charged. But the thing is, the moment we are able to retell our stories, removing ourselves from the center and putting Krishna in the middle, the misery we face in our lives, the psychological traumas that we experience, just disappear. And if you look at the Srimad Bhagavatam from the beginning to the end, that is what Parikshit Maharaj experiences. Imagine someone who's dying in 7 days, completely distraught. Parikshit Maharaj is thinking of himself as the cursed one. He is in the middle of his story, his own story. And he has a kingdom. He got it from his grandparents after a very hard-fought war. He knows he's the dharmic king. And now, he doesn't know where all of this is going to go. And Shukadev Goswami appears and retells the story of Parikshit Maharaj to Parikshit Maharaj, but removing him from the middle and putting Krishna there. And by the time the Bhagavata finishes, Parikshit Maharaj says, I don't feel distraught anymore. What just happened? It's that power of that story where you remove yourself from the middle and put Krishna there. Right? And this is the beauty of Krishna consciousness, Krishna prema. That, apurva means unprecedented. You don't get something like this ordinarily in the world. Right? Everybody is trying to compete and put themselves number one. And I've seen the scene where, and let me ask you this question. How many of you know Neil Armstrong, the first person to supposedly walk on the moon? Who was the second person? Nobody hesitated when they said Neil Armstrong, but the second person, right? Everybody wants to be number one for this reason. You came second, okay. You came first, wow. Everybody wants to be number one. However, if you look at the stories of Sri Krishna, when Krishna is having lunch in the afternoon, we have a Bhoga Arati song, Bhaja Bhakato Shakala Shri Gaura Hari, Shri Gaura Hari Rahi Goshta Vihari, Nanda Jashamati Chitta Hari, Bala Holo, Damodara Aisha Ikhano, Bhoga Mandire Boshi Karaho Bhajana. Nandera Nirdeshe, Nanda Maharaj is saying, come on, sit down, don't eat anywhere, sit in the right place. Right? Nandera Nirdeshe Boishe Giri Vara Dhari, Baladevo Sahasakha, Boishe Shari Shari. They are all eating, and what are they doing? I said this in a class a few days back, and people didn't believe me, but it's there in Shastra. Don't try this at Krishna house, okay? Bhavano bajai or dai hari bol. Have you heard of this one? You know what that means? Cover your ears. It means making farting sound with your armpits and saying, Haribol. Don't try this at Krishna house. So Krishna and his friends are having so much fun when it's time to eat. They make those sounds with their armpits. That was just to wake you up. Remind you about this. But am I clear so far? Just to sum up. Whenever and wherever there is a decline of dharma, rise of adharma, the Lord appears. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says in his commentary to that verse, don't think avatars appear in India. To the extent there is dharma in any culture, any civilization, the Lord will appear. In the Krishna Samhita, he says that Moses is a great devotee of the Lord. Jesus is a great devotee of the Lord, who are in different rasas like Dasya and Sakhya and Vatsalya and so on and so forth. Right? That was number one. So whenever there is a decline of dharma, the Lord appears. Number two, the purpose of the Lord's appearance is always to uplift dharma, but there is something more, which is to have loving relationships. And these loving relationships are so beautiful that sometimes the Lord expands just to have loving relations with himself. And that is Sri Krishna Balaram, Anuruddha Pradyumna, that is Mahaprabhu Nityananda Prabhu, Advaita Acharya, Gadadhar and Srivas. And wherever we see the manifestations of the Lord, he is never alone. Right? And he teaches something very simple. What is it? Loving service, which is not self-centered. The moment it is self-centered, misery begins. The moment we tell our stories with Krishna in the middle, the whole nature of our life changes. And just for this, Sri Advaita appeared. Right? And no matter how things were, he was a constant, loyal follower of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now he was senior to Mahaprabhu by many, many years. And Mahaprabhu used to bow down and touch his feet, calling him Acharya. But Advaita said, no, I'm your servant. And one time, a very interesting incident took place. Who wants to listen to a funny story? Mahaprabhu decided that someone's in ecstasy. Mahaprabhu decided that he was going to take sannyas. And it was very hush-hush. Only 3 people knew. Because for someone to take sannyas is like, in today's, comparison, would be like someone going to Mars. That, once you go to Mars, you probably just go there and never come back. And so Mahaprabhu was taking sannyas, his whole village who loved him so much thought, okay, this person is never coming back. Hell broke loose. And Mahaprabhu couldn't care less. Because Madhavendra Puri, remember I told you that temples were ransacked, libraries were burnt. Madhavendra Puri went around India collecting disciples who would reinstate Vrindavan to its original glory. And Mahaprabhu wanted to take sannyas, go and do what his Param Gurudev wanted. And so he took sannyas. He was 24, his wife was 16. Those days that was normal. And his mother was heartbroken because she had lost 8 other children. The other son who grew up took sannyas as well and he was never heard of. He says, you can't do this to me. And Mahaprabhu pleaded and left. And then he began running towards Vrindavan. But things are never simple in the Lord's life. Whether it's Lord Ram, Lord Sri Krishna or Lord Gauranga Mahaprabhu. Never simple. It's always complicated. So as he was running blindly towards Vrindavan, Nityananda Prabhu kind of joined him and figured that he is totally off right now. He trusts me so much, he will believe whatever I say. So he had a presence of mind. So what he did is he went to some cowherd boys near Shantipur, that map that you saw right there. And he said, you would notice a mad monk running and asking for directions. If he asks you, where is Vrindavan? You tell him you've reached. And he gave them some bribe. And very soon Mahaprabhu was running, where is Vrindavan? Krishna, I miss you. And he says, and he kept asking for directions. And he saw these young cowherd boys grazing their cows and asked for directions. And lo and behold, where is Vrindavan? Nityananda Prabhu had arranged it with them. Oh, you've reached Vrindavan. And Mahaprabhu was in ecstasy. He jumped in the river. He was completely soaked. And then suddenly, he saw Advaita Acharya with a calm face, standing on a boat with fresh change of clothes, coming towards Mahaprabhu. He said, Advaita, how did you get here? And Advaita Acharya said, Mahaprabhu, wherever you are, it is Vrindavan. And I have cooked some dry sabjis and some soup. Mind you, they had soup back then. At home, just come and eat some. I said, no, I'm a sannyasi, I cannot do this. I said, please. And there was Chandrasekhar Acharya, his uncle. And there was Sita Devi, Advaita Acharya's wife. And Mahaprabhu figured that Nityananda Prabhu cheated him. So right there. Always hanging out and always doing these kind of things. And Advaita Acharya brought Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu to their house. And he said, I just took some tidbits, little bit. But he, in reality, had prepared a huge feast. And Mahaprabhu said, I'm a sannyasi, I cannot eat all of this stuff. Just take a little bit. He said, no, take, let's split the banana leaf into half and give me a small plate. How many of us do that? Give me a small plate. And Advaita Acharya is like, nothing doing. He just opened up the whole banana leaf. It was a steel plate, all kinds of plates, and he began to arrange food. And every time Mahaprabhu ate something and finished it, he would just silently pour a little more. And Mahaprabhu said, no, please don't do this. And he said, oh, it's just a little bit. Just a little bit. But there was something more fun that happened that day. Remember, Advaita Acharya was a Brahmana Shiromani. He was one of, like an elite among Brahmanas because of his learning. And Nityananda Prabhu was an Avadhuta. Avadhuta means a lawless renegade. That's what it means in Sanskrit, an antinomian renegade. Someone who has no rules. In fact, he took sannyas from Lakshmipati Tirtha. He came to Srivas Thakur's house. The first thing he did is broke his own danda, broke his kamandalu, threw it away. And people went and complained to Mahaprabhu, your guest at Srivas Thakur's house, he's gone mad. He took sannyas and he broke his own danda. What is this? And Mahaprabhu came and said, why did you break your danda? He's like, what use is a stick? Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. And someone complained, actually, he's at the house of Srivas Thakur, and Srivas Thakur had a huge compound, and there were animals there. The Caritamrita and Bhagavat says there were cats and dogs, and he fed everybody. And Nityananda was seen running around naked around that compound. And he's like, is this person really mad? And mind you, Advaita Acharya is this very elite, polished scholar. And Mahaprabhu is this younger, bright scholar. And with Mahaprabhu comes his best friend, Gadadhar Pandit, who is a very elite, polished scholar. And then there is Srivas Thakur, who is a wealthy man. It's a huge compound. Everybody respects him. And then there is the Avadhuta. No rules, lawless, doesn't understand instructions, doesn't care. And after, and Prabhupada writes, he is considered a disciple of Lakshmipati Tirtha, who is a great Madhva saint. And he comes to Navadvip, and the first thing he does is, if you do not have love for Lord Hari, what good are your rituals, your danda, your kamandalu and all of that? Antar bahir yadi haris tapasa tatah kim. If Hari is inside your heart, within your heart and outside, what is the point of your austerities? Nantar bahir yadi haris tapasa tatah kim. If Hari is not within your heart, nor outside, what's the point of your penance? So that was Nityananda Prabhu's mood. And Advaita Acharya's mood was, we got to follow rules. And so, when Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu came together to eat at Advaita's house, they had a special relationship. They got pleasure out of insulting one another. You know, sometimes friends lovingly insult one another. You look like a crook. Is that because I am a crook? Now give me your money. In this way, Advaita Acharya and Nityananda used to always fight. Always. And so when they started eating, Advaita started saying, you are eating too much. You have the appetite of an ogre. Stop eating. You're going to ruin my reserves. And Nityananda said, what kind of a host are you? Give me more. And Mahaprabhu was just watching the two, laughing. What could he say? His best friend and his favorite mentor. In the same room. Right after he had taken sannyas. He refused to eat at Advaita's house, but out of the love of people of Navadvip and Shantipur, he had to just let go of his sannyas and just said, neat. But there was one more thing that happened that day. And you read it in the Caritamrita. That is, Nityananda was known to be someone who broke all rules. Right? And he was born in a Brahmin family, but he used to hang out with the lowest caste people. And in India in those days, once you did that, you were an outcast. And Advaita Acharya, even though he lived among the tribals, he had the respect of a Brahmin. Now in those days, it is said that if a Brahmin stepped on the shadow of a Chandala, then he would lose his caste, which meant in practical terms, he would become an outcast. If he shared food with somebody who had lost his caste, he would also lose his caste. If any food from your plate touched the body of the other person, you would lose his caste. So, Advaita Acharya, in the eyes of society, was still a very high-class Brahmana. And so, in that particular day, he kept insulting Nityananda Prabhu till the straw broke the camel's back. He kept saying, you're this, you're that. And Nityananda Prabhu at one point just picked up rice from his plate and threw it at Advaita. You have pie fights in America? There was a prasad fight there. And out of his anger, he threw the rice at Advaita Acharya. And just by doing that, and it's a cultural explanation, Advaita Acharya was no longer that elite Brahman. And that's why he just got up and began to dance in ecstasy. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. It was Brahmatirtha Prabhu's class, but he insisted I speak, and I'm very grateful that you've patiently heard. We should spend some time on Q&A for 10 minutes.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
When Advaita Acharya petitioned Lord Caitanya to come, was one of the reasons because he was seeing at the beginning of Kali Yuga things that should be happening at the end. I got that from someone. Is that true?
Probably. Kali Yuga comes in waves.
I have two questions. Thank you everyone for such a wonderful class. The first question is, you mentioned that Srila Prabhupada is the Shakti-Vaishnava, an expansion of Lord Nityananda. And my understanding was that Srila Prabhupada is a Nitya Siddha who came down asked by Krishna for the purpose of writing these books and starting the Krishna consciousness movement. And that he's also a Shakti-Vaishnava, and that means he's a Nitya Siddha empowered Jiva who is empowered by God. So when you said expansion of Lord Nityananda, I was like, wait. I understand Lord Nityananda is the original spiritual master, but I didn't think that Srila Prabhupada was like an expansion of Lord Nityananda.
Okay, I see. I think I need to gloss the word expansion more clearly. So, for example, if I'm cooking and I ask my daughter, hey, can you pass me the salt? And she brings the salt to me. She becomes an expansion. And in Vaishnava Siddhanta, that's considered expansion. There are direct expansions, there are indirect expansions, right? So Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, they are direct expansions. In Caitanya Lila, for example, Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu, they are Vishnu Tattva deities. And so Virbhadra Prabhu is considered an expansion, he is Vishnu Tattva, right? Janava Devi is not Vishnu Tattva, but she is also considered an expansion. Jivas by default are expansions of Bhagavan, right? So the Upanishads say that each Jiva is like a spark of that cosmic fire of Brahman. Right? So we have to understand expansion as in that sense. The difference between Jiva and Ishwar is that Jivas don't demonstrate the 6 opulences of the 64 qualities. Even Lord Shiva comes at certain number of qualities. Vishnu comes at a certain number of qualities. Krishna is considered Purna Bhagavan because he shows all 64 qualities. This is in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So Srila Prabhupada is a Jiva who is an expansion of Nityananda Prabhu. And he is also Nitya Siddha. The idea of a Nitya Siddha, and it's often misunderstood in many circles, is not in a Miltonian sense. Milton had this idea that there was, the angel in heaven and the angel fell down and that's Satan and there's Leviathan and all of these, right? That's Christian theology. The idea is that any individual has to be recognized as a Swarup Siddha, Nitya Siddha, any of that, by the characteristics they demonstrate. So someone who is naturally Krishna conscious from the very point of their birth has to be considered a Nitya Siddha. And Srila Prabhupada was like that. He says that there was never a time I was not Krishna conscious. So that's the indication of a Nitya Siddha, right? And at the same time, somebody who doesn't demonstrate those qualities, but they still become Krishna conscious anyway. Srila Prabhupada also points out that once you become a Siddha, then whether it's Nitya or Swarup, it doesn't matter, right? It's like once you're married, whether it was a love marriage or an arranged marriage, it's a marriage. Was I able to answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you. Can I ask one other question?
Sure.
So you mentioned that Advaita Acharya was the teacher of Advaita non-dual philosophy. I guess I haven't studied so much of his life. Was he also, while he was teaching non-dual philosophy, was he also a devotee that whole time?
He is always Mahavishnu.
I mean, yeah, he's a Mahavishnu, but...
When he was, Lord Sri Krishna plays the role of an innocent child, then he plays the role of a warrior, then he plays the role of a doting husband. So Advaita Acharya was playing the role of a teacher of Advaita, and then Mahaprabhu came and he convinced him about a very basic principle. In modern American parlance, it would be like, it takes 2 to tango. If it's 1, you can't dance, right? That's the whole premise of bhakti. That if you want loving relation, you got to be 2. You cannot be 1 and have love at the same time, right? So at one point, there is a Leela, there is a pastime where Mahaprabhu was not paying Advaita Acharya enough attention. And Advaita really wanted his attention. So he spread the news that he's teaching Advaita again. And Mahaprabhu had a nickname for him, Nara. It was like, it doesn't mean anything, but it's like an old man. And when Mahaprabhu heard that he's gone back to teaching Advaita, he came with a stick to beat him up. So what kind of a scholar are you? You are my associate, And Advaita was so happy that finally I was looking for your grace, I was looking for your darshan. You were away from me and I had to do this just to see you. It was a play.
Yeah.
Right? And in that way, various Vaishnavas as well as the Lord does many things. And Bhagavata says, Chaitanya Bhagavata says, Chaitanya Caritamrita says, Vaishnavero kriya mudra vijnana bhujhai. The kriyas, the activities, the gestures of a Vaishnav is undecipherable even by great scholars. Nobody really gets it. It's transcendental madness, but there is a method in that madness. Yes, and
thank you, Prabhu. Firstly, I would like to say I love your Bengali accent. It's been long since I heard that. So, my question is, when we say Pancha Tattva, does it mean 5 independent truths, or what is the actual meaning of Pancha Tattva?
Tattva, tat means that. In English we have the word is. This is maroon. In Sanskrit, the same word is us. Right? Asti. That which exists is tat. That-ness is tattva. Right? So, I see someone called Narottam Prabhu sitting in front of me. The Narottam-ness, the person-ness of you is it's tattva. So these are truths, but truths manifested as persons, because in Vedic culture, Hindu culture, Vaishnava culture, however you want to put it, truth is not impersonal. Right? So, for example, we have wealth coming in and out of our pockets. We balance our books every year. We care about money. But in Vedic culture, we call it Lakshmi. We put a name and a face on it. We worship it. And we interact with it as if we are interacting with the person. We call Ganga mother. Right? And from a materialistic point of view, it's just a river. And there is Mississippi too. Nobody says Mother Mississippi. But Indian culture is such that, what is considered inanimate is considered personal. Right? So even the shadow of the moon is considered, Rahu or Ketu. They are persons. Everything. And our acharyas and our rishis and munis are very aware of this fact. That's why, in America, when I go around, I meet a lot of people, and they name their cars. Oh, this is my Jimmy. Why? Why do you have to name your car? Because persons relate to persons. Personalism is how we comprehend reality. And instead of trying to make everything impersonal, our Shastras make everything personal. Dharma is a bull, earth is a cow, river is a mother. Right? Bhakta Rupa, the form of a devotee, Swarupakam, Bhaktavatara, Bhaktakyam, Namami Bhakta Shakti, the power of devotion is also a person. And the truth and the person are non-different. Like Krishna and his holy names are non-different. So once we are able to flip our minds from this material vision and try to understand everything subjectively, we will see personality everywhere. Even this room, if you think about it, is a person. The Chaitanya Bhagavat says, anything that serves the Lord, his shoes, his umbrellas, mridanga, his clothes, they are an expansion of Balaram. So this floor, the walls, this is Balaram. It's a person. And we treat it like a person. We are grateful to be here. You interact with it as if you're interacting with the person. Right? In this sense, Panchatattva is a person, but they are truths at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did I miss anything here? Sorry, the chair is tilted that way.
Thank you for speaking today. You mentioned this mood of being like a warrior and the war that's kind of going on in the modern time, in the mind. So my question is how we can carry that mentality of being a warrior and fighting this battle in the minds of ourselves and others in the mood of Advaita Acharya.
Well, that's an excellent question. Who wants one final good story? In the Mahabharata, the Pandavas were losing badly. And Sri Krishna said, see, I am no longer in charge of the script. Krishna said, Arjuna, we must go and tell Drona that his son is dead. He is formidable. And he says, Drona would never believe Ashwatthama is dead. Drona's son was Ashwatthama. He would never believe Ashwatthama is dead. He says, only if Yudhishthira Maharaj, who has never spoken a lie in his life, goes and tells that Ashwatthama is dead, Drona will believe and he will stop fighting. And Yudhishthira Maharaj refused. He said, no, I have never lied in my life, I will not lie. And Bhima said, I'll fix that for you. We have an elephant by that same name. So you went and killed that elephant. And he says, now you can go tell Drona that Ashwatthama is dead. So Yudhishthira goes and says, Ashwatthama is dead. Because he would never lie. But there is a problem with that lie. There is a problem with that lie. And the solution to that problem is also in the Mahabharata. It says, once upon a time there was a sage sitting under a tree who had taken a vow of silence, and he would only indicate the truth with gestures. And one day as he was meditating, he saw that an innocent man was running from a group of bandits. And somehow he went and hid behind the bushes. And the bandits came and held the knife on the sage's neck and said, where is this man? Now if he uttered the truth, if he indicated, then he would have broken his vow. But if he did not say the truth, then an innocent man would die. And the Mahabharata asks this question, which is greater among the four legs of dharma, satya, socha, tapa and daya? Which is greater, satya or daya? And this was a question asked to Yudhishthira Maharaj. And he didn't understand the subtleties of dharma there. And the story goes in the Mahabharata that this sage who was silent indicated to keep his vow of truth. And he was held liable for the death of an innocent person. So therefore compassion is higher than truth. Right? And so Krishna asked Yudhishthira Maharaj, are you able to go and tell him that Ashwatthama is dead? Otherwise, tomorrow Drona is so furious, he's going to kill a lot of innocent people. And Yudhishthira said no. And the Mahabharata says the next day, the wheels of Yudhishthira Maharaj's chariot dragged on the ground. And Nilakantha in his commentary says that it dragged on the ground not because Yudhishthira lied, but because he refused to listen to Sri Krishna. Right? So I hope I was able to answer that question on how to be in a state of mind. Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna, Yatra Partha Dhanurdharaha, Tatra Vijaya Sri Bhuti Dhruvaniti Matirmama. Wherever there is Krishna, wherever there is Arjuna, there is bound to be Vijaya, victory, Sri, opulence or abundance, and bhuti, success. Right? We just have to listen to Sri Krishna. To the extent we are able to listen, these three things will be there. Right? At the beginning of the battle, there was every chance that the Pandavas would lose. At the end of the battle, they won because Krishna was on their side. That's the short answer. Thank you. Sorry, I'm over time.
Fasting.
We're feasting with our ears.
Yes.
I brought the Chaitanya Caritamrita manuscript. If anybody wants to take darshan, we can have it here. And
Jai.